And that is the thing that keeps you up at night, right?
Yeah.
The idea that art can be a mirror, but, sometimes it's a confession. We usually think of artists as storytellers, people who invent worlds, who create characters. But what happens when the storyteller is narrating a crime scene in real time? And not only that, but set to a piano melody that is so beautiful, so soulful, it almost makes you forget what you're actually listening to.
It is the ultimate dissonance, isn't it? You are tapping your foot to a confession, or at least what the state of Florida firmly believes is a confession.
Exactly. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. It is February 6th, 2026.
Huh.
Today, we are opening a file that feels like it has been sitting on the desk for a decade. We are looking at a story that sits right at the intersection of musical genius, extreme poverty, what seem to be severe mental health struggles, and just brutal, cold-blooded violence.
We are talking, of course, about Jamell Maurice Demons. The world knows him, for better or for worse, as YNW Melly.
And the context here is absolutely wild. We are sitting here in 2026. This guy's been locked up since February 2019.
Unbelievable.
We are talking 7 years, his entire early 20s, spent in a cell without a final resolution. And the latest update. The retrial isn't even on the docket until January 2027.
It's a legal black hole. It is unprecedented in many ways for a high-profile capital case to drag on this long without a final verdict. It doesn't happen.
So here is our mission today. We have a mountain of sources here. Court transcripts, ballistics reports, psychological evaluations, appellate court filings, and a discography that is frankly haunting to listen back to now.
It really is.
We aren't just doing a biography. We really need to try and answer 2 specific questions. 1, how does a kid go from a Kanye West collaboration to facing the death penalty in the span of, 6 months?
And 2, and this is the big one for me, is the Melvin persona, this violent alter ego he claims to have. Is it a legitimate mental health crisis, or is it the most convenient legal defense ever invented?
Right. Was it a cry for help, or was it premeditation of a different kind?
To even begin to answer that, you have to peel back the layers of the YNW collective. Because this wasn't just a rap group. This was a brotherhood forged in a very specific, and I would argue, a very dangerous fire.
Let's start with the soil, then. You can't understand the fruit without looking at the roots. Where does Jamell Demons come from? Because Florida Man is a meme, but the reality of his upbringing is so far from funny.
He comes from Gifford, Florida, and I think for listeners who aren't familiar with Florida geography, it is so important to distinguish Gifford from the tourist brochures.
Right, this is not South Beach.
No, this isn't Miami Beach. This isn't the theme parks of Orlando. Gifford is a small, unincorporated community in Indian River County. Historically, it has been marginalized, economically depressed, and really plagued by systemic issues for generations.
It's one of those places where opportunity doesn't just knock on the door. You have to kick the door down just to find it.
Precisely. And his entry into the world wasn't exactly stable. He was born on May 1st, 1999. His mother, Jamie Demons King, was 14 years old.
14. I mean, just pause on that for a second. She is a child raising a child. She should be worrying about 8th grade algebra, not, raising a son.
She was in the 9th grade. And that dynamic is absolutely crucial to understanding him. They essentially grew up together. There wasn't a generational gap in the traditional sense. They were more like peers in a constant struggle for survival.
Wow.
He grew up without his biological father, though later a rapper named Dante Thaw Gift Taylor claimed paternity. But functionally, Melly was raised by a single mother who was struggling to pay for housing, struggling to keep the lights on, moving from place to place in the poorer sectors of the county.
And in that kind of vacuum, no father figure, extreme poverty, a mother who is practically a sister in age, something else usually fills the void.
The streets fill the void. We know from his biographical records and, frankly, his own lyrics that he joined the Bloods gang at a very, very young age.
And this is so key.
It is. This is crucial context. The violence wasn't a genre he adopted for SoundCloud clout later on. It wasn't an aesthetic choice. It was the fabric of his daily life. It was protection. It was community. It was a career path, in a way.
I was looking at his rap sheet from before he was famous. I think a lot of people assume the double murder charge was his first big run-in with the law, but that's not true at all. There's a deeply established pattern here.
A clear escalating pattern. Go back to late 2015. Melly is 16 years old. He gets arrested for an incident near Vero Beach High School.
Right.
Now, this wasn't a fist fight or some locker room brawl. He fired a gun at 3 other students
At a school.
in the immediate vicinity of the school, targeting students he had an issue with. He was convicted of aggravated battery, discharging a firearm in public, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. He served a year in juvenile detention for it.
So at 16 years old, the threshold for using lethal force is already crossed in his mind. He's willing to pull a trigger to solve a problem. That is a massive psychological line to cross before you can even legally drive a car alone at night.
Exactly. And that year in detention is actually where the YNW identity really starts to solidify.
Okay, so let's break that down. What does YNW even mean?
YNW stands for Young Nigga World, which they sometimes sanitized for the radio as Young New Wave. But at its core, it was a street collective. And you had the key players who, become central to this whole tragedy.
Yeah.
You had Jamell Demons, who is Melly. You had Anthony Williams, known as YNW Sack Chaser. You had Christopher Thomas Jr., who is YNW Juvie. And then Cortland Henry, YNW Bortland.
And these aren't just backup dancers or guys he hired for a music video. These are his best friends. From everything I've read, they were inseparable.
They are brothers in every sense but blood. They shared clothes, they shared money, they shared bunk beds, they shared dreams. And when Melly comes out of that juvenile detention sentence, he starts uploading tracks to SoundCloud. I think he was only 15 when he started. And this is where the talent becomes just undeniable.
It really is. I've gone back and listened to the early stuff. He has this voice. Critics at the time called it bright harmonies slathered in grit. It's such a perfect description.
Yeah,
he doesn't sound like a typical Florida trap rapper. He sounds more like an R&B singer who's seen way too much. It's soulful, almost gospel-like in its melody, but the content, the lyrics are pure street warfare.
It's the juxtaposition of the sweet melody and the violent lyricism that's the secret sauce. It creates a kind of cognitive dissonance for the listener that's incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
And that formula produced the track that changed everything for him. Murder on My Mind.
Okay, we have to unpack this song.
Yeah.
Because in hindsight, looking back from where we are now in 2026, it feels less like a song and more like a prophecy.
Yeah.
Or a blueprint.
It was released in 2017, but it really blew up in 2018. It is, for anyone who hasn't heard it, a piano-driven ballad. If you took away the lyrics, played it as an instrumental, it sounds like something you'd hear in a church or a really sad movie. It's incredibly emotive.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
But the lyrics, I mean, they are a first-person narrative of an accidental homicide, of homicidal ideation, and the psychological weight of killing someone you know.
I wake up in the morning, I got murder on my mind.
It's so catchy.
Yeah.
That's the disturbing part. You catch yourself humming it in the shower, and then you stop and you realize what you're actually saying. It's chilling.
And it worked commercially. The song eventually went, 6x platinum? But here's the data point that really matters, the one that tells the whole story.
Okay.
It peaked at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 after he was arrested for the murders of Sack Chaser and Juvie.
Wow.
The crime fueled the consumption. The audience wasn't just listening to a song anymore, they were looking for clues.
Right.
It became part of the evidence file in the court of public opinion.
That is a grim metric for success. True crime as a marketing strategy, even if it wasn't intended that way. But, okay, before the arrest, he was skyrocketing. We can't forget that. He had the Kanye West co-sign.
That was the absolute peak. January 2019, the song Mixed Personalities on the We All Shine mixtape. Cole Bennett directed the video. You have Kanye West, one of the biggest, most influential artists in history, standing next to this kid from Gifford, Florida, goofing around, smiling. It was a signal to the whole world that Melly was the next big thing. He had arrived.
And Mixed Personalities isn't just a song title, is it? This brings us to the whole Melvin concept. This is where the story gets deeply psychological or maybe deeply manipulative, depending on your point of view. Who is Melvin?
According to Jamell Demons, he suffers from dissociative identity disorder, or at least some form of a split personality. Melly is the artist. He's the charismatic one. He loves his mom. He wants to buy houses for his friends. He smiles for the camera. He's the entertainer.
And what do you see in the Kanye video?
Exactly. And then there's the other guy.
Melvin.
Right, Melvin. Melvin is the protector. Melvin is dark. Melvin is the one who grew up in the streets of Gifford. Melvin does what needs to be done to survive. Melvin doesn't feel empathy the way Melly does.
And he leaned into this hard. It wasn't just some offhand comment in an interview. His debut studio album in November 2019 was titled Melly vs. Melvin,
which hit number 8 on the Billboard 200. Commercially, this split personality narrative was a goldmine. It added mystique. It made him more interesting than just another talented rapper.
But looking at it legally, through the lens of what was about to happen.
It's a fascinating setup. If you establish early on in your art that Melvin is the one who commits violence, you are creating a narrative distance. I didn't do it. The guy living in my head did it. It's a defense mechanism you're planting in the public consciousness, whether you're aware of it or not.
It's the Jekyll and Hyde defense, but modernized for the Instagram era. Don't blame me, blame Melvin. But unfortunately, this wasn't just a concept for an album cover. In October 2018, things got very, very real.
This is the turning point, the event that halted the meteoric rise and started the long, agonizing fall. October 26, 2018, Fort Lauderdale.
So walk us through the initial story. Because what they told the police is, I mean, it's a world away from what the police say actually happened.
It's a completely different reality. Correct.
Ah.
So, early that morning, YNW Melly and YNW Cortland Henry, they arrive at Memorial Hospital in Miramar, Florida.
Okay.
They are driving a Jeep Compass. Inside the vehicle are the bodies of their two best friends, YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie.
Both dead.
Both dead from multiple gunshot wounds. It's a bloodbath inside that car. So Melly and Bortland tell the police a very specific story. They say they were the victims of a drive-by shooting.
The classic story.
The classic story. They claim a car pulled up alongside them on the freeway and just sprayed bullets into their vehicle, killing their two friends, while Melly and Bortland miraculously survived without a single scratch.
Which is, I mean, the first red flag right there.
A huge red flag. And Melly even plays the grieving survivor on social media. He posts these emotional messages about losing his brothers to senseless violence. He's crying out against the violence in the streets that took his friends. But the police, they start looking at the Jeep. And the CSI aspect of this case is where the prosecution feels they have a slam dunk.
Right, because physics don't lie.
Physics don't lie. This is crucial for you to understand. We need to talk about ballistics and glass. When you shoot into a car from the outside, a drive-by, the glass breaks a certain way. The bullets travel a certain trajectory.
Yeah, you'd expect the bullets to enter from the side, travel across the car, maybe embed in the opposite door, right?
Exactly. And you would expect the glass debris to be scattered inside the car in a pattern consistent with an inward force. But when the forensic experts from the Broward Sheriff's Office analyzed that Jeep Compass, the whole narrative just fell apart.
How so? What did they find?
They found that the drive-by shots, the holes on the outside of the car, were likely staged. The angle suggested the shooter was standing still, firing into the car while it was stopped, not from another moving vehicle.
Okay, so that's already bad. But what about the kill shots?
That's where it gets undeniable for the prosecution. The bullets that actually took the lives of Sack Chaser and Juvie, they came from inside the car.
From inside?
Correct. The trajectory analysis, where they use rods to trace the path of the bullet from the entry wound through the body, showed the fatal shots originated from the back left seat of the Jeep Compass.
And who was sitting in the back left seat?
Surveillance footage from the recording studio they had all left just a short time earlier that night showed YNW Melly getting into that specific seat, the back left seat.
So the prosecution's theory is what? They're all driving together, they go somewhere, Melly, sitting behind his friends, just shoots him.
That is the prosecution's timeline. They argue they drove to a desolate area. Melly, from behind, shoots and kills Juvie and Sack Chaser. Then he and Bortland get out of the car and shoot up their own car from the outside to make it look like an attack.
And then drive the bodies around for a while before finally going to the hospital.
That's the theory. And they use cell phone tower data to back it up. The data from their phones showed them driving to a remote area in the Everglades, stopping for a significant period, which is presumably when they staged the scene, and then, only then, driving to the hospital.
It's so elaborate and so cold. I mean, there was another forensic detail that I read about that really stuck with me. It was the stippling.
Yes. Gunshot stippling, or tattooing. This occurs when a gun is fired at very close range. Unburned gunpowder and particles shoot out of the barrel and hit the skin, embedding themselves and creating a telltale pattern around the wound.
And one of the victims had that.
One of the victims had stippling on his wound, yes.
Which means the gun was inches away, not feet away from a passing car on a highway.
Exactly. It indicates an execution-style shooting from within the vehicle. It's the kind of evidence that is incredibly hard for a defense attorney to explain away.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
You are talking about executing your two best friends, sitting inches away from them, and then having the presence of mind to drive around, stage a crime scene, and concoct a cover story. That is a level of coldness that is, it's just hard to comprehend.
And that is precisely why the state of Florida went for the death penalty. They argued this was cold, calculated, and premeditated. They argued it was a gang action, perhaps a dispute over money or leadership within the YNW collective. It wasn't a crime of passion.
So Melly turns himself in February 2019. He posts that now infamous Instagram caption saying, "I lost my two brothers by violence, and now the system wants to find justice." Basically proclaiming his innocence to his millions of fans.
Yeah.
And thus begins the legal labyrinth. I mean, we are 7 years in. Why is this taking so long? It feels unprecedented.
It is a perfect storm of legal complications. First, of course, you had the COVID-19 delays in 2020, which just froze the entire court system for the better part of a year.
Right, that affected everything.
It did. But the real battle, the one that has caused the most procedural chaos in this specific case, has been the back and forth over the death penalty.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because for a while it looked like the death penalty was off the table, wasn't it?
It was a massive legal tug-of-war. In July 2022, a judge, Judge Andrew Siegel, ruled that Melly would not face the death penalty.
Why? On what grounds?
It was a technicality. The prosecution had apparently failed to file the notice of intent to seek the death penalty in accordance with a new procedure. They basically missed a deadline or didn't follow a specific rule.
Which must have been a massive relief for the defense team.
Oh, enormous, for a few months at least. But then in November 2022, an appellate judge overruled that decision. The death penalty was put back on the table.
So it's on, then it's off, then it's on again.
Exactly. And then the law itself changed in Florida, and this is huge. Governor DeSantis signed a new bill that changed the requirement for a jury's death penalty recommendation.
Oh, so what was the change?
Previously in Florida, a jury had to be unanimous, all 12 jurors, to recommend that a defendant be sentenced to execution. The new law changed that requirement to an 8-4 vote, just a supermajority.
That is a huge shift. You don't need everyone to agree to execute someone anymore, just, what, 2/3 of them?
Exactly. It lowered the bar for the prosecution significantly. It meant they only had to convince 8 people, not 12. So when the first trial finally started in the summer of 2023, the stakes were absolute. It was life or death with a lower threshold for death.
Let's talk about that first trial. Summer 2023. It was a media circus. People were live streaming it on TikTok, analyzing his facial expressions in court, his doodles on a notepad. It was a spectacle.
It was.
What happened inside that jury room?
It was clearly intense. The prosecution laid out everything we've talked about. The ballistics, the cell phone data, the staged crime scene, the inconsistencies in the story. They painted a picture of Melly as a ruthless gang leader, a cold-blooded killer.
And the defense. What was their strategy?
Their strategy was, essentially, reasonable doubt. They attacked the credibility of the lead detectives. They suggested the investigation was sloppy. They argued the phone wasn't always with Melly, so the data was unreliable. And they leaned heavily on the no-motive angle.
Right.
They kept asking the jury, why? Why would he kill his best friends when they were all on the verge of getting rich and famous together? It makes no logical sense.
Which is a fair question. If you're on a ship sailing towards a mountain of gold, why would you blow a hole in the bottom of it?
And the jury really struggled with that. They deliberated for 14 hours over 3 days. The judge even gave them something called an Allen charge.
Explain that for us. What's an Allen charge?
An Allen charge is basically the judge telling a deadlocked jury, look, we have spent a lot of time and taxpayer money on this trial. Please go back in there and try really, really hard to come to an agreement.
So it's a pressure tactic.
It's a significant pressure tactic to try and avoid a mistrial, but in this case, it didn't work. No. On July 22, 2023, the judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial. The jury was hopelessly deadlocked. Rumors swirled about the split. Some said it was 9-3 in favor of a guilty verdict. Others said it was closer. But the point is, they couldn't get to a unanimous decision on guilt.
So mistrial means reset. You hit the reset button and you have to do it all over again with a new jury. But here we are in early 2026 and the second trial still hasn't happened. Why the 3-year gap? That seems like the biggest delay of all.
This is where we enter the current limbo. In January 2024, the entire process ground to a halt over a dispute about digital evidence, specifically a promotional video.
A video? What kind of video?
It was a mini documentary about Melly's life that his own team had produced. The prosecution wanted to show it to the jury to prove his gang affiliation and what they called his criminal mindset.
What was in it?
It apparently showed him with weapons, throwing up gang signs, discussing the street lifestyle. The defense argued it was hearsay, that it was artistic expression, and that it would prejudice the jury unfairly against him.
Basically, the rap on trial debate in a nutshell.
Exactly. The judge sided with the defense and ruled to suppress it, meaning the jury would not be allowed to see it.
And the prosecution appealed that ruling.
Yes. They filed what's called an interlocutory appeal. And when you appeal a pretrial ruling like that to a higher court, the trial clock stops. Everything freezes. You have to wait for the appellate court to make their decision.
And that takes a long time.
That takes months, sometimes years, and that is why the date kept slipping. A date was set for early 2025, then that came and went. October 2025 came and went. Now, the official docket says January 2027.
That is just agonizing. By the time 2027 rolls around, Melly will have been in Broward County Jail for 8 years. He went in at 19 years old. He will be nearly 28 when he faces a jury for the second time.
It raises very serious constitutional questions about the right to a speedy trial. But on a human level, it means his entire young adulthood has been erased. He's effectively grown up in a cell, waiting.
And let's talk about his career during this time. Because unlike some artists who get locked up and disappear, he tried to keep the music coming. But you can only record so many verses over a jail phone, right?
The decline has been stark, and it's a lesson in modern celebrity. In 2021, while he was inside, his team released the album Just a Matter of Slime.
And that one did okay, I remember.
It did okay. It peaked at number 11 on the charts. But that's because they had a vault of pre-recorded vocals. They could still put together songs. They had features from big names like Lil Baby, Lil Uzi Vert, Future. There was still momentum.
But the vault runs empty eventually.
It did. In 2024, the album Young New Wave dropped, and it was met with silence.
Crickets.
Complete crickets. It was generally panned by critics as being uninspired. But more importantly, it failed to chart in any significant way. It proved a harsh reality of the music industry. Infamy and notoriety can only sustain a career for so long. Without physical presence, without touring, without new music videos, without new lived experiences to write about, the audience eventually moves on. The free Melly trend on TikTok died down. The machine needs to be fed.
It's the out of sight, out of mind rule. You can be the biggest story in the world for a year, but if you aren't feeding the content machine, the machine just finds someone else to focus on.
Precisely. And we shouldn't forget, while all this is happening, while he's fighting this double murder case, he is also still a suspect in another murder. The 2017 killing of Sheriff's Deputy Gary Chambliss in Gifford.
That's right. I totally forgot about that. Amidst all the headlines about sack chaser and juvie, he hasn't been convicted of that, right? Just a suspect.
No conviction, no charges have been formally filed in that case. But being a named suspect in the death of a law enforcement officer that hangs over the courtroom like a dark cloud, it reinforces the prosecution's narrative that Melly isn't a musician who made one terrible mistake. He is a career violent offender who just happens to rap. It colors every bail hearing, every motion.
And that brings us right back to the rap on trial debate. We see this with Young Thug and the YSL case in Atlanta. We see it here. Prosecutors are using lyrics, videos, and artistic personas as evidence of guilt.
It is the central friction of modern hip-hop law. It truly is. If Johnny Cash sings, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," we all agree it's storytelling. Nobody checks the Reno police logs from 1955.
Right, it's art.
But when YNW Melly sings "Murder on My Mind," describing a shooting in the first person with specific emotional details, prosecutors hold it up in front of a jury and call it a confession.
And because the Melvin persona is so explicitly defined by him as a violent entity, he kind of handed them that weapon to use against him, didn't he?
He did. He blurred the line between art and reality so effectively that now the legal system can't tell the difference either. And the prosecution's argument is simple. He told you who he was. He told you about Melvin. Believe him.
So let's zoom out. We are looking at a tragedy with no winners. Sack Chaser and Juvie are dead. Their families have been waiting nearly a decade for justice with no closure. Melly is, for all intents and purposes, rotting in a cell. The music career is on life support.
It is a lose-lose-lose situation. There is no happy ending here, regardless of the verdict in 2027. It's just different degrees of tragedy.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at the rise and the fall of YNW Melly, what is the ultimate takeaway from this story?
I think it serves as a grim, modern, cautionary tale about the intersection of incredible talent, a toxic environment, and personal choices. You can have all the talent in the world, a voice that can captivate millions, a cosign from Kanye West, but you cannot outrun your past or your actions. And the legal system, for all its flaws and its agonizing delays, is a machine that grinds slowly, but it grinds on. It doesn't care about your billboard placement or your streaming numbers.
It's the paradox we started this whole deep dive with, the melody and the murder. You listen to Murder on My Mind today, and it hits completely differently than it did in 2018. It doesn't sound like a hit song anymore. It sounds like a ghost story.
And until that retrial happens in 2027, if it happens then, that ghost story is the only ending we have. A story frozen in time.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought to chew on. We, as a culture, often romanticize the tortured artist or the gangster rapper. We consume the violence as entertainment. But in this case, the violence stepped out of the speakers and into the back seat of a Jeep Compass.
It stopped being entertainment, and it became Exhibit A in a murder trial.
Exactly. So as we sit here in 2026 and wait for 2027, ask yourself, is Melvin a mask that Jamell Demons wears to protect himself from the world, a character he created for his art? Or is Melly, the happy singing artist, the actual mask, hiding a person who was capable of killing his best friends all along?
That is the question the next jury will finally have to answer.
Look at the timeline for yourself. Listen to the music again. Decide for yourself. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Stay curious.
We'll catch you on the next one.